roll up your left sleeve for me, please.
In what state of mind are your victims at this time, normally?
I wouldn't refer to them as victims, Al. I wouldn't say that they're very other than normal at this time.
Really? They would regard this as a normal procedure?
Yes, I would think so.
What does this do?
This measures your breathing. May I have your right hand? That's right.
And what's this?
These fingertip contacts will measure your nervous sensitivity level. Okay, just relax that down there comfortably. And the third attachment is simply a blood pressure cuff, which will pick up your blood pressure readings.
How long does a test like this normally take?
Oh, about 15 or 20 minutes. All right, fine. Now we're fully operational. If you'll just sit comfortably erect in your chair and keep your eyes straight ahead, please. And please answer the questions just either with a yes or a no answer. Are you holding back any information about a past mental ailment?
No.
Are you withholding information about a theft from a former employer?
No.
Are you holding back information about a debt in which you're behind in your payments?
No.
A lie detector. An infernal machine probing for weaknesses on the dark side of my character.
Are you holding back information about the actual amount of your gambling?
No.
The Inquisition continues, with my reactions not only recorded by polygraph, but observed from behind a disguised two-way mirror.
Has drinking ever caused you to lose at least one day's working time?
No.
All right, fine. The test is concluded. Would you just relax now?
Nothing's sacred, nothing's personal. Yet, I've committed no crime. I've just applied for a job. But first I must face the growing menace of an inhuman finger which writes and moves on.
In time, this will be more generally accepted than it is now. Over the past few years, we've seen that the growth of this has been fantastic. Industry and retail and just about every type of commercial source is using polygraph more and more, both in pre-employment and specific loss testing purposes.
The ambitious businessman scrambling up the corporate pyramid towards power and status can be third-degreed and investigated in many and curious ways, though executive recruiters justify such interrogation.
The consultant, or if you please, the headhunter, has a very large responsibility to make the right choice and a professionally sound placement. It is for that reason that I believe that everything and anything which is germane to establishing the competence of a man is important, valid, and justified.
Converging upon Manhattan from the grey flannel belt, America's leading heroes, business executives, who enjoy the greatest prestige, the greatest rewards. The president of General Motors takes home £330,000 a year, and other executives pick up more than £135,000 basic. In return for such film star salaries, big business demands nothing except their entire lives. They must accept, even welcome, a certain manipulation. They must be examined and not found wanting in the dossiers of a new breed which pursues, investigates and records everything, good or bad. Management recruiters like Ward Howell, Industries, poachers and Bodysnatchers.
Well, we're becoming almost respectable. This is how we were called, what we were called some years ago. Now we're referred to as headhunters. We look for men from $24,000 a year up to $150,000. This, I'm talking now here in terms of base salary, not including bonus, deferred compensation, stock options, or other fringe benefits.
That's £10,000 a year up to £60,000.
That is correct, yeah.
And have you got positions available for men at £60,000 a year now?
Yes, we have 6 of them at the present time.
That takes me back, rather. I mean, you're hunting round with £60,000 a year jobs, and you can't find the men.
That is correct. Or the client hasn't been able to find them. We just filled a job at £60,000 a year base salary last week, and I hope to close another one of these within the next 2 weeks.
So every one of these is a head?
Every one of these is a person. We have, I believe, 40,000 of them in here.
So why is it that these haven't supplied you with these 60,000 a year people?
Well, they have. There are lots of 60,000 pounds a year men in here. I don't know how many. There are probably 200. But each company, each client has such different requirements. One company may be in Pittsburgh, and a New Yorker might not want to move there, or another would demand a man who was interested, believe it or not, in shooting and fishing. We found the president for a bank last year, and one of the requirements had to be he was a good hunter and fisherman, because he's going to live up in the northwest part of the country, and this is what they do up there.
Hunting for the key to the executive washroom, the businessman may submit to psychological probing from a distance, to aptitude tests sent through the mail, but curiously comprehensive.
I would say that the number of questions would range from, 2,200 perhaps to 2,500 questions. But what's a day and a half out of a man's life if he's going to make a career out of a job and he's going to stay with the company for 20 or 30 years?
I see from seeing him on paper, you say that you can find out how he or she will get along with the sociometrics involved in the job.
That's right.
How he'll cope with problems yet unborn.
That's right.
And you give an insight into an individual's behavioral dynamics.
That's right.
Now, to many people, this might sound like a sort of pseudo-psychological mumbo-jumbo.
Well, it's as simple as ABC when you recognize that in all aspects of life, in the workaday world and in your own home life, life consists of one thing time and time again, and that is how you get along with others. Do you identify with them? Are you autocratic? Are you persuasive? Are you a bulldozer? Are you a tyrant? Now you might say, well, why do you want to know his age, height, and weight? Well, you take a man who is 6 feet 3 inches tall, weighs 291 pounds. I'm exaggerating, of course, and he's age 31. Now, on the psychological test, we'll find that this man has an abundance of aggressiveness and driving power. He has no tact and diplomacy. He has quite a bit of dominance. This man's going to be just too much man.
Many employers hire private detectives to investigate private lives, and they can discover everything, so much that at times they're even tolerant.
We would overlook a man who was dilatory about certain things. We'd overlook a man who was an overworker. In other words, a fellow who would do his job in 10 hours instead of 8. We'd overlook that. We'd overlook mild dalliance. We'd overlook a lot of little things, but we won't overlook dishonesty, and we won't overlook disloyalty to his company. If a man's been disloyal to one company, he's going to be disloyal on the next run.
Well, what facets of his character or personality would not concern you?
Of our activities which do not tend to interfere with his career, it is really totally unimportant what kind of sport the man is engaged in. It is important if his sport happens to be extramarital relations. Now, I would like to say that I am not one who would say that because of a man's sport being extramarital relations, he should not have the job. As a matter of fact, I believe that that may, in some cases, be an asset. Or on a recent television show here in New York, I was asked the taboo question about what would you do if you would find that a man is a practicing homosexual? And I would say, and is it really your business to know about it? I say most decidedly it is, because that make him more qualified for the job, depending on the job, than somebody else. And on the other hand, in a different environment, it may ruin him, his career, as well as the company.
What about the men's wives? Do you also investigate them?
We investigate them. It's not really an investigation. It's an interview technique to see how the man gets on with his wife. Yesterday, down in Charleston, West Virginia, one of my men interviewed a man and his wife for a position with a coal company. And I said, when he got back, I said, "How'd you like that candidate?" We said, "I couldn't find out anything about him. His wife talked the entire time. He never got a word in edgewise." Well, now, obviously, she had disqualified her husband. However, wives are not too important in the major metropolitan centers where they have no connection with the business world or even the social world of the other executives.
They can be absorbed in the city.
That is correct.
But in a smaller place...
In a smaller place, they are expected to get on with wives of the other executives in the company, and their actions are more closely regarded, and it is important in a smaller town.
But New York's a monstrous metropolis designed to shrink people, an environment not drawn to human scale, yet luring the ambitious towards this stress and scramble by the luster of its rewards. In their advertisements, headhunters warn employers about the dangers of the ingratiating phony who, as he makes his way up the corporate structure, should be tackled by executive searchers like Kurt Einstein, who expose the fit, the unfit, and the counterfeit.
The counterfeit executive is keenly interested in your religion, where you come from. He all of a sudden knows people you know. He has a, if you are Jewish, he has a Jewish grandmother. If you have children, he also has children. He is very ready to exchange pictures, talk about that. He does anything at all not to talk about those things which could become slippery. He receives important overseas calls in your office, and he says, "I have told you I can't accept this $50,000 job. I am much more interested in this other job, but before that I want to confer in Washington." These calls he would receive. He will do anything in order to make sure that you get the message.
You're seeking out the sham and breaking down the weak.
Right.
So the real and the strong emerge to claim their rewards at the New York Motor Show. In a hard-sell huckster society, the new is always better, promising, and within arm's reach. The gleaming car peddled so alluringly is no longer just transport, of course. It carries its owner up the social scale.
This is a car of the future, 2 or 3 years away at this particular moment.
And then into who knows what golden adventures.
It's got a look that shouts go, a ride that's real class, and a socket to 'em action when you step on the gas. And that groovy little girl has a sporty look that's classic.
Despite the sock-it-to-'em action, industry suffers a shortage of executives. For the low birth rates of the Depression years deliver fewer managers today, just when the post-war baby boom provides more young workers to be managed and to buy. Across America, corporations like to breed their vice presidents with the house birthmark, like Aberdeen Angus. There's an endless demand for the loyal organization man who, as they say, plays on the team and doesn't stick his head up. There are classic rewards for those who fit in. But once in, it's almost impossible to opt out of the remorseless drive. Chester Berger, management consultant and author, knows the problems of the man at the top of the pyramid.
Number one, the rewards are very, very high. These men are accustomed to high pay and to living at a very, very lavish scale. And if they lose their footing and they slip and they fall off the corporate ladder, let's say, perhaps suppose they're 45 years old, maybe 40, maybe 45, whatever. they're going to have a devil of a hard time getting another job. I'm always astonished where I will talk to a senior corporate executive, let's say the vice president or president of a major national corporation. Maybe he's been making $50,000 to $75,000 a year, not this year, but for years. And then I discover that he's up to his ears in debt, personal loans, mortgage on his house. My God, if he loses his job, what is he going to do? Where is he going to get another?
Fighting for a future and time and space in a noisy and abrasive city more overcrowded than mankind's ever known. Some executives are defeated. Their bodies may take it, their minds cannot. Psychiatrists believe 1 in 8 suffers serious emotional problems. Some who can afford the £300 a week fees retreat to these quiet Connecticut woods, to the Silver Hill Foundation, where 4 psychiatrists look after 75 patients, where men who couldn't cope with the corporate machine come down from executive suites to concentrate overstrained minds upon simpler therapeutic problems.
After a year at that level, I found myself committing more and more of my time and energies to my job and less to my family. And I came to the point, a crossroads, where I had to decide to commit myself fully to that or to back off and give time and energy to my family, and I chose the latter.
How old were you then?
I was 33. I saw people year after year who, to me, were marvelous workers, just kind of falling by the wayside, and I can envision my putting myself in total into it and falling by the wayside. I didn't want this.
This hospital's directed by a psychiatrist experienced in the treatment of those who have fallen by the wayside. Dr. Charles Neumann considers the symptoms of such executive stress.
Anxiety, tension, and depression. And the other category in which they manifest themselves is in their interpersonal relationships. These deteriorate, their inability to get along with other people, their peers in the company, their superiors, their inferiors, and what have you.
Now, is it a thought that it's the second and third rung of the ladder that carries the load, that the man at the top says, I don't get ulcers, I give them?
A little better than 50% of the people who came to us were in the 5th decade, the 40 to 49 year age group. I think that this is the rung of the ladder chronologically when the competition is greatest, when the make it or break it era is in progress.
But surely, Doctor, a lot of middle-aged men in a lot of communities around the world are ambitious. They want to get on. They want to do the best they can for their families. Is this peculiarly American?
I believe that it is. I believe that we are indoctrinated with the free enterprise system, and success is only measured by material achievement. And the lack of individual values, the lack of emotional values in determining success in this country is a very great lack in my mind.
What's remarkable to me is that in America's era of opportunity and wealth, significant men of decision will submit to such mental intimidation, manipulation, dehumanizing. In this search for the clinically efficient executive automaton, who can tell the ultimate impact of such reliance upon the doubtful truths of psychological spies and stress interviews, of bugging and checking and lie detecting? But perhaps to every man, and not only to every American, there does come a point when the reward outweighs the humiliation. I asked John Chasty, detective, whether only junior executives would tolerate investigation by his private eyes.
We have gone as high as hiring a president of a corporation, a substantial corporation. The rate of pay for that particular candidate was $150,000 a year, plus certain stock benefits and options and an interest in the business, as they say, a piece of the action.
Don't you find that men of this caliber might resent an invasion of their privacy?
Oh, yes, they would. But they know that if they want the job, that they've got to permit a reasonable, fair, background checkup.
I would have thought a lot of people might have thought, I don't want this job badly enough to put up with this sort of thing.
Well, what is this sort of thing any different than filling out an informal employment application?
Well, it has connotations of third degree, doesn't it? You know, and stare into this light, and what were you doing on the night of June the 3rd?
Well, all we're doing here, Alan, is verifying the information that you've previously supplied.
It would seem that a man, if he's going to earn a lot of money and do very well, needs to surrender his life to the company. He needs to surrender.
I think that's true. I think that's true.
It's surprising to me that so many men aren't prepared to do that.
Well, they seem to be driven by ambition. Of course, you have this pressure and these long hours and so forth, but many men have houses in the Caribbean or in Florida and get away for 2 or 3 weeks of vacation several times a year. I know one man that flies to Nassau. He's head of a $2 billion company. He flies to Nassau every Thursday night after work and gets back Monday about noon. And this is the only vacation he takes, but he takes it all during the winter season, then goes to Cape Cod in the summer for a similar length of time. But on the other hand, the traditional long weekend that you have in England is not known here. I think the other difference is the fact that the English people don't work as hard as the Americans do. Possibly the reason for this is what seems to us very excessive tax structure, personal tax structure. So they take their compensation in the form of perks, which are really not allowed here.
The other thing, of course, it may be that the sense of values is different and that there isn't this overriding, driving ambition.
Well, yes, and I think possibly the English have broader interests rather than just interests in building up industry and so forth.
The characteristic pattern of the successful executive is a man who's accustomed to pushing up. This is the kind, not every, executives aren't any smarter than anybody else. They don't work any harder than anybody else, but they push harder than anybody else. And the reason that they push harder, I think, is to prove really, not to you or to me, but to prove to themselves how good they are. And the only way, in our American culture, a man judges his success by how high he is on the job scale, how much money he's making. This is the standard of success. So to prove to himself that he's good, he has to push very hard. Now, a couple of years ago, there was a biography that was intended almost as a eulogy of Cardinal Spellman, then the Archbishop of New York, written by Father Gannon, who was president of Fordham University, a Catholic university. And he intended to be completely favorable about Cardinal Spellman, but all that came out was a picture of a hard-driving, aggressive man fighting his way up to the top to become Archbishop. So what I'm suggesting is that I don't think it's business, I don't think it's the American economy. I think this is people, but in our culture, the particular manifestation of insecurity is to fight your way to the top in the corporate structure. Now, I think perhaps in England, to show such aggressiveness would be to risk great insecurity. And I think that if I wanted to be feel secure in a British culture, I would walk the line and not talk too loudly and do what was expected of me in the business scene. But in this country, that would be quite the opposite. In this country, if you were too stodgy and didn't move too fast, you would be considered a failure.